You said that suffering was one of the things that inspired you to create this model. Can you say a little more about that?
Well, I always feel so bad for people when they're suffering, right? And one of the wonderful things that my studies led me to was this understanding about how suffering is actually something we cause, that we're actually doing it to ourselves. And that was a big revelation to me, because I thought that people were suffering because they didn't have anything to do with it. But the choices that people make, either by omission or commission, generate the kind of experience they have in this lifetime. And when I realized that, oh, okay, well, if people are making choices, then it's a matter of trying to help them understand what choices are they making and why are they making those choices, right? So it was a wonderful thing for me to have this possibility open up, where if we can take responsibility for our experience, if we can take responsibility without having self-blame, we can change what we're doing. If we can take responsibility for the fact that, so for instance, if I could take responsibility for the reason that I'm staying up at night is because I want to tell my neighbor off because they cut down my tree and I don't like that, and then I realize, wait a minute, I'm suffering here because I'm attached to that tree, and because I want to make that person pay I'm attached to making them pay for having harmed something that I'm attached to. So when I discovered this issue around suffering, I actually found a great deal of insight in the Buddhist understandings about the nature of suffering. And when I realized that people could make choices that would diminish their attachment to things, or that would diminish their aversion to things, or that would help them understand how they may have been misconceiving of certain things, then we have a method for helping people come out of suffering. And so a lot of depth hypnosis is looking, where is the person attached? Where is the person avoiding? What kinds of misconceptions do they have? And how can we use the processes of regression, the processes of insight inquiry, the processes of understanding other aspects of experience more deeply in order for them to be able to emerge out of that suffering.
Can you talk a little bit about your studies in Buddhism? And also, I know you spent a lot of time studying cultural anthropology and shamanism, and just how they influenced you personally.
Well, I was exposed to both shamanic practice and Buddhist practice very young, because I was living in Hawaii, which had a large Buddhist community, especially among the Japanese immigrants there. And also the shamanic cultural background of Hawaii is very strong. So I was exposed to both of them early on, but I didn't actually understand the power of these models until I began studying comparative religion in my academic studies. And then I realized, oh, both of these traditions have very powerful ways to help people emerge out of suffering. And shamanism in particular is very catalytic. It's very, it brings a lot of change in a short amount of time. So by combining the Buddhist understandings about the nature of suffering and the shamanic practices for relieving suffering, you have a pretty unstoppable model, which depth hypnosis embodies.
And then there are some of your own processes that you've developed.
Well, I would say all of the processes of depth hypnosis are something that are not necessarily Buddhist or not necessarily shamanic. The whole of depth hypnosis is much greater than the parts. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate all of the inspiration from these other traditions, but depth hypnosis is definitely its own thing. And it is constantly revealing itself to me in every session. And I am a student of it as well as a teacher of it.